For John Sunday, the cult leader, serial killer, and artistic torturer extraordinaire, things were going pretty great. As good as they had ever gone, actually. And it wasn't a fluke nor a flash in the pan. He had put in the work and the planning, and it was all paying off. This was a golden era for the cult called the One True Faith, and he was reaping the benefits. Recruiting was up, morale was high, construction was almost complete on his murder museum, and his control over the faithful was stronger than ever. He wasn't having a good time montage set to Walking on Sunshine or anything like that, but it was the serial killer cult leader equivalency. John Sunday had taken this cult by force. He believed that it was his birthright, and so he had slaughtered all who opposed him, with a little help from his creation, best friend, and pet monster, Razormouth. Some years after that, John Sunday had entered into a truce with the DRO, the shadowy government agency. This truce precluded him or the One True Faith from being legally targeted, no matter what the charges, no matter what the organization. Blanket immunity. In return for this, he had given up his pet. He wanted to appear like he was playing ball with the government, even though it was only a temporary concession. Apparently, the DRO didn't have a firm grasp on what blanket immunity entailed. So when the opportunity presented itself, John Sunday struck back against the DRO, shattering the truce, freeing Razormouth, and they were powerless to retaliate. So after that, after the massacre at Black Site 1, it was all blue skies. John Sunday had no masters. He answered to no one. He had killed them all. He was the master, with an army of red-robed devotees and acolytes. But, as they say, into each life some rain must fall. Even into the charmed, happy-go-lucky life of a sadistic torturer. And so it came to pass for John Sunday, when he found a walled-up alcove in the back of the church library. Smashing through, he discovered a trove of old books locked inside a 200-year-old trunk. They were all handwritten, leather-bound, sealed with the wax emblem of a serpent. He picked up one off the top, randomly, cracked the seal, and started to flip through the pages. And with every sentence he read, he felt his blood pressure rise. He was reading the secret history of the One True Faith, the birth of the cult, the true meaning of their purpose. His pulse racing, John Sunday flipped ahead to the final page and saw the signature. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem, killers, cannibals, and cults, fearful fiction and furious fact, tall tales, and terrible truths. This is a scary home companion. Inwardly, John Sunday was reeling. Outwardly, he showed nothing at all. It was business as usual for the one true faith, because the key word was, of course, faith. Something that he had to project unflinchingly and unfailingly every minute of every day. This required a bit of effort on his part, because John Sunday did not share that faith, and he never had. He ran the cult, he enforced most of its traditional beliefs, although he did modify a few of them. But he had never bought into the mythology behind it all. He didn't need to, of course. The old ones were gone. Before John Sunday came around, the old ones had been the stewards in waiting for the return of the Blood King. This was said to be very literal, a return of the man who walked out into the desert, reincarnated as a snake god. A more modern approach and figurative interpretation of the same material would have this new incarnation of the Blood King being a new person, returning to become the head of this mighty snake, the church, which had grown in his absence. This was a distinction he had been trying to subtly push and incorporate into the teachings of the one true faith. Slowly, he wanted to open up the faithful to the idea that maybe John Sunday was the last of the old ones, the last of the stewards, or maybe John Sunday was the Blood King reincarnated. He couldn't push it. It was too self-aggrandizing, and he knew it. So he had to be subtle, until the idea could gain enough momentum to come to life on its own, as ideas often do. John Sunday needed to continue being a shining beacon for the Blood King, an unfailing and perfect vessel. So he kept on as he always had. Only now he was spiriting away to read the journals privately whenever he had a moment. The journals were all numbered. They began with the Ripper recounting his childhood. When he was a boy, he had been told by a nun at his orphanage that he was a descendant of the mad Scotsman, Sawney Bean. The nun had beat him mercilessly over the course of years for having tainted blood. He did some research and found that the legend said Sawney was the patriarch of the cannibal Bean family. They lived in the caves near Ballantrae Bay, where they feasted upon passers-by and swelled their ranks over the years with incestuous offspring. And then King James VI sent troops to have Sawney and his family captured, where they were executed before the crown. When he was 16, a man in his own right, the Ripper left the orphanage and took an apprenticeship with a mortician. Here he learned the intricacies of the human body and became quite adept at the funerary arts. When he had saved up enough coin to travel and built up sufficient skills to earn more coin as he traveled, the Ripper, who was now in his mid-20s, made his way to Ballantrae Bay. He was searching for his birthright, and he found it. After days of looking, the Ripper stumbled into an old, dank cavern that still showed trace remnants of the tenants from over 2 centuries before. He went deeper into the darkness, where he found an altar. A stone altar to the Ophidian. Although the entire cave system was damp and cold and covered in slime, the altar was clean and clear, pristine after all this time. He knelt before it, and the stone altar opened up, giving him a vision of the mighty snake god that slithered under his feet. The Ophidian cracked open the world, showing him the arcane corpses of the old gods in a grand design for the future. A future in which the Ripper played a key role. The next morning, he woke refreshed, reinvigorated, and knowing what he must do. As the vision had directed him, he searched the walls of the cave until he found the directions for the next stage of his quest. There it was. SSE 666K. South-southeast, 666 kilometers. He traced it out on his map and found that his destination was a place called Whitechapel in London. So he made his way to England on foot and then began to execute the next steps that the vision had showed him. Killing the women, mutilating them, making sacrifices of blood and pain, and tapping a wellspring of fear that empowered him. And this wellspring buoyed him as he left Whitechapel through the port and sailed across the ocean to America. Once he landed in the port of Baltimore, Maryland, the Ripper performed the same ritual again. Another 5 women, another set of 5 mutilation murders set in a pentagram on the city map. The only difference was that in London, people noticed 5 dead women, and in Baltimore, they did not. The Ripper had a bit of money. He had the esteem befitting an upper-class white British man of somewhat noble carriage. He called himself Dr. John Christie, and he started crisscrossing the states as efficiently as he could in an attempt to meet women. Not just any women. Oh no. Women of great and specific power and particular mindsets. Women like Lizzie Borden, for example. The Ripper visited her in her jail cell as she awaited trial, and they spent one world-shattering night together. And more of her ilk, like the husband slayer Belle Gunness, a.k.a. Lady Bluebeard, a.k.a. Hell's Bell. Or Lizzie Halliday, who would later become the first woman in America executed via electric chair. Or Jane Topin, evil nurse and poisoner. And he even ventured down into the Caribbean and found Giselle Pigan, better known, of course, as the Mad Butcher of San Juan. Spreading his seed wasn't the only reason the Ripper had gone into that part of the world, mind you. He had also ventured deep into the heart of the Devil's Triangle, searching for the breach to hell that lies within. Over the last few days since he had started reading the journals, the changes in John Sunday had become apparent to all, despite his best efforts. Finally, he decided to address it in one of his evening sermons to the faithful. He said to his flock, "I'm receiving messages and I am struggling to figure out what they mean." One of the children, who was kneeling in the front row, stood up and shouted, "This weekend's the full moon. Maybe there'll be a new name in the house." The child's mother tried to shush her, but John Sunday praised her. "Yes, child, we are of the same mind. I, too, believe we will receive a message from the Blood King this full moon." One of the many traditions observed by the One True Faith, and one of the very few traditions observed with equal reverence by John Sunday, was the house on the edge of the woods. It had been constructed over a century ago, and so now those woods surrounded the house in all directions. But the faithful still called it by its original name, the house on the edge of the woods. Because it wasn't about being at the precipice of where the woods ended, it was about being at the precipice of where the world ended. It was on the edge of the woods and the edge of someplace far away, someplace the Blood King could talk to. So the stories went anyway. On a full moon, and not on every full moon, but only on a full moon, a message could appear in the cabin. In an envelope on the edge of the stone fireplace in the house on the edge of the woods, a simple message. Usually a command, more often a name. These messages were considered sacrosanct, a direct communication from the Blood King, not, under any circumstances, to be questioned. When a message was found, it was obeyed instantly and to the letter. When a name was found, that person was always located, captured, and then brought back to the One True Faith. Not as a prisoner. Please know that. Not as a prisoner. As a revered guest. The reason the One True Faith was so fervent about this was because it showed them the hand of their Almighty in action. It brought them fresh blood. People the Blood King said were important. The reason that John Sunday revered this tradition in equal measure is that once upon a time, his name had been found in that cabin. He hadn't learned this until well after he murdered the old leadership and took control. But the entire reason that he had been chosen by the old ones and brought into the fold was because his name had been written down in an envelope in the house on the edge of the woods. He had been chosen from on high. For what purpose, no one knew. John Sunday's instincts told him that he needed to finish reading the journals before the rise of the next full moon. The following journal was dated 3 months after the previous, as the Ripper returned to the United States in 1890, coming up through the Gulf and Texas into New Mexico. He was searching for people who could help him, people he could help in equal measure. Now, all along the way since landing in Baltimore, the Ripper had been meeting with loyal Ophidians. The snake god had followers everywhere, on either side of the ocean, and the Ripper always made sure to pay the proper respect. It was a ruse. These other cults, churches, congregations, what have you, he knew they were all blind fools. He alone had been shown the blueprint, the grand design for the new world, and they knew nothing of it. They were in thrall with the echo of a ghost. They had no idea of the true faith. So the Ripper glad-handed them. With his charm and gentility, it was quite easy. What he was really seeking was counsel with the Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers are accursed Navajo witches, outcast from their own people. They possessed a profundity of dark magics, but they lacked vision. The snake god had been slowly poisoning them for decades, swaying them, weakening them. And when the Ripper appeared, they were all ready to join. The Ripper and the Skinwalkers spent months out in the desert, learning from one another, teaching each other. More than that, they helped him to see the next stage of his ascension. The Ripper was not just seeding the new world with his foul progeny. He was also preparing for his return one day as a god. The Ripper selected from the Skinwalker tribe a female, particular viciousness, to become his wife and usher in his true children. In his writings, the Ripper referred to them simply as the family with capital letters and gave very few details about them. The family was a private concern of his. And the one true faith, he considered that his gift to the world. As the Ripper had settled down to raise his family, keeping his Skinwalkers close by, they had started to attract a lot of new followers. Somehow, they acted as a dark magnet that drew in broken souls from across the plains. The one true faith as an organized religion was created and instituted to give these newcomers a sense of belonging and purpose, to organize them for later use and keep them loyal. But not to the Ophidian, to the Ripper, their blood king, ascendant. The tradition of the house on the edge of the woods was crafted as a way to show physical evidence of an outside force. It was one that the Ripper controlled. He left nothing to chance. The mysterious messages and names that they found at the old cabin had always been planted by him. The one true faith was carefully constructed with bits and pieces of the old religions mixed in with new aspects invented out of whole cloth, based entirely on the core beliefs of the Ripper and the content of his vision. He wanted to appeal to both Ophidians and ghastly cultists, so he wove together a dark history on the commonalities between them. Take better advantage of whatever their existing beliefs happen to be. The mythology of the old ones he had created to give the Skinwalkers better standing over the cultists, to give them positions of power. There were 6 others, 3 men, 3 women, Mr. Horrid, Mr. Wretched, Mrs. Rotten, Mrs. Vicious, the surgeon's son, and the surgeon's daughter. And the Ripper himself was the 7th of the old ones, called the Machinist. This took years to enact, to finally become gospel for his followers. But when preparations were complete, the Ripper had built the foundation for a mighty kingdom. Not just a cult, but a religion of deeply ingrained values and beliefs. One that could prosper and grow in his absence. All of the preparation was not in vain. And the Ripper was finally, after years, bestowed another vision. And that was the end of the journal. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper. John Sunday went through every journal again, laying them out side by side sequentially, making sure that one hadn't got lost in the shuffle somehow. He had read them all, and it had stopped short of any revelation. One question above all nagged at him. If the Ripper had staged the house at the edge of the woods, then where were the messages and names coming from after he disappeared? And if it was from the old ones, where had those names been coming from after John Sunday had murdered them? The full moon rose. As was the custom, no one entered the house on the edge of the woods except for John Sunday. Inside, he didn't find a message. He found a leather-bound book, the last journal of Jack the Ripper. First, John Sunday read the final journal of Jack the Ripper. Then, he lied to his congregation. In these final writings, the grand design was well underway. The Ripper, the chosen scion of the snake god, had seeded the new world with his foul, corrupt essence. Each of his genetic bloodlines would spread his legacy. And not by choice, it would be hardwired into their DNA forever. And then the Ripper had crafted a chosen family, his true heirs, that would chronicle his deeds and track what grew from his seed. His legacy was the modern world. The family were left behind to observe and record it, so that the new gospel could be written when he returned. He wrote, "I leave my family behind to chronicle my legacy. They do not need to uphold it. I have already changed the world. They merely need document it for my glorious return." The Ripper also had the strength and organization of the one true faith as a base of power, a foundation for an unholy empire. He knew that his army of faithful would be well tended and grow, even as he went into the desert to follow his final vision. After so much work, so many years, another vision had been bestowed upon him by the Ophidian. This time he had seen the snake god itself, laid bare, undisguised. It lay deep under the earth, dead and alive all at once, awaiting his arrival for a chance at rebirth. The Ophidian hissed into the Ripper's ear, giving directions, coordinates in a dead language with a dead tongue. The Ripper awoke with a head full of fire and had scrawled down images and words and numbers and bits of maps from memory into the pages of this journal. John Sunday studied the crude drawings, a lopsided mesa and a shallow valley with walls honeycombed with small caves. The Ripper meditated over what he had seen. He consulted with the Old Ones and the other skinwalkers. Finally, he decided his course of action. He knew that he needed to leave to follow his destiny, but there could be no shift in power while he was gone. No reason for the sheep to doubt the shepherd. And so the Old Ones, the Ripper and his chosen 6 skinwalkers, passed on their names, their mantles, and their likenesses of the Old Ones to 7 other skinwalkers. Using their dark and ancient Navajo magics, they adopted the appearances and the voices of the Old Ones. And so no one realized there had been a change in leadership. The Ripper and his 6 left the compound quietly, never to return. The last page was almost empty, save for one sentence. The Ripper stated, "I will return one day, either riding on the back of the serpent or carrying its heart. Yours truly, Jack the Ripper." Scrawled underneath the signature in ballpoint pen and a different hand was the sentence, "Follow his path to Whitechapel." There was no question about it. He had to go. John Sunday was not a man of faith, never had been, but his mind was still reeling. He stayed there in the house on the edge of the woods for over 3 hours, reading the journal cover to cover and then reading it again. Then he marched back to his office, sending word ahead. The entire congregation was to gather in supplication and wait for his word. John Sunday was not the type of man to let his internal disquiet manifest externally. Instead, he doubled down on his outward conviction. He had something important to tell them. The entire cult gathered in their red robes, so thick they blanketed the field surrounding the church. John Sunday stood above them as he had stood above them on the first night he took over. He held up 7 envelopes. They were all empty, of course, but his followers didn't know that. Brothers and sisters, I have such revelations to share with you. As you all know, the stewards of the Blood King, called the Old Ones, had become corrupted. I had to execute them for the good of us all. But the Ophidian and the Blood King need stewards, the most purely devoted to herald his return. The Old Ones are dead. And now, in the house on the edge of the woods, I have been given the names of the new 7. 7 from among your ranks, you, the faithful, You offer up the new incarnation, the superior incarnation of the old ones. Slowly and with tremendous reverence, John Sunday called off all 7 names. Ones he had researched, people that he had been studying and eyeing for months or, in some cases, years. People that he knew he could rely on for blind, dogmatic obedience. And then the final name of the 7, the new Machinist. He paused. He acted shocked before his flock. And then he called forward the young girl who had spoken out the week before. It seemed that the Ophidian moved in mysterious ways. There was to be a new Machinist. For John Sunday had also been called. And this young girl was to carry his mantle, the most important of the old ones, because like the founder of the one true faith, John Sunday had been blessed with a vision by the snake god. He told them. And now he had to wander into the wilderness to pursue this fate. His past and his future, the past and future of them all, was a snake eating its own tail. It was his charge to find the source, the beginning and the end. And he would return carrying the truth of the Ophidian with him to usher in a new era of the one true faith, one in which they would escape from the shadows and conquer the world. For the first time in his life, John Sunday was feeling kind of a little something inside of himself, something bigger than himself. As he spoke to the congregation, the words that were pouring from his mouth took on a life of their own. They were rash, possibly even foolish, but they felt right. It felt right to follow this journey, to trace the footsteps of the Ripper. For the first time, he spoke to the faithful from the heart, and they were in rapt attention. And he vowed to them that when he came back, everything would be different. He didn't know how, and he couldn't tell them why, but he knew it all the same. His name had come to the one true faith through the house on the edge of the woods. And now he'd been given a roadmap for the truth through the same venue. This was all connected. After the sermon, he called together a group of his fiercest guards, his most loyal lapdog soldiers, to be his escort on this journey. He didn't tell them where they were going. He didn't need to. They were all hungry to serve him, to show fealty. He followed the directions precisely, the ones from the cave in Ballantrae Bay. South-southeast, 666 kilometers. Roughly 414 miles into the desert. But not as the crow flies. John Sunday transposed the map from Ballantrae Bay to Whitechapel on top of a map of this area and followed that path. He drove alone, with the map on the seat next to him, not to be seen by anyone else. There was a short convoy of red robes trailing behind him in a series of nondescript vehicles. They drove until there were no more roads, and then they abandoned the cars and trucks and continued on foot through the sun-blasted rock and gritty sand. For 3 days they walked, sleeping at night under the sprawl of the Milky Way. John Sunday never faltered, and his guard drew strength from his conviction. On the eve of the 3rd day, the sun began to set, and they hunted for that night's shelter. And then he spotted a familiar lopsided mesa in the distance, one that looked uncannily like the one drawn in the journal. With fresh legs, the men surged forward, carrying John Sunday towards destiny. He stopped them. He sent them back so that he could proceed alone down into the narrow valley, one honeycombed with narrow caves on either wall, just like drawn in the journal. This was it. This was it. He found it. With one notable difference. The valley was strewn with bodies, human corpses, some weeks old, but not much older. Agents and soldiers and cops, oh my, all spread out and weighed down to the ground with rocks, spelling out the word mine. Above it all, painted on the stone in long-dried blood, was graffiti, a picture of a monster wearing a crown. King Razormouth. John Sunday took it all in and said, well, shit. Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. You can find the show on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or contact us directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. We appreciate everyone who subscribes, who likes the show, who shares the show with their friends. I would urge you to check out our Patreon page. Bonus episodes, extra material, post-mortem analysis breakdowns of every new episode. It also gives me, the creator, a chance to interact with my fans a lot more. And I'd like to take this opportunity to give a shout out to patron Monica, one of my show's oldest and most ardent fans. Just before I sat down to record this episode, Monica wrote to me. And I have to say, she got me fired up. Her feedback mattered. Your feedback matters. So please support the show. Let me know what you think. And Monica, thanks again. This story was produced and edited by Jeff Davidson. and featured music by Charlie Megira and the Bet Sheehan Valley Hillbillies with Diary of a Young Man. Psychic Witch with Hacksaw Triangle, Gorium with This Strange Vision of a Gray Nightmare, Alex Mason with Blood Sacrifice, and Chelsea Oxendine with the theme music. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next time around marks the 100th episode of A Scary Home Companion. And we're going back. We're going way back. We're circling back to the first episode to tell the true story of Cannibal Island.